Welcome back to Tide Pod on the YouTube home of Tide Illustrated. Jack Knowlton alongside Tony Sukalis, who, of course, is joining me and you, the great viewers from Tampa, where the 2024 season has come to a disappointing end for Alabama. The Crimson Tide losing 19-13 to Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl, snapping a 17-year streak of winning 10-plus games, and, of course, ending the Tide season on a disappointing note. Tony, there's plenty to unpack here and dive into with the game itself and, of course, how the Tide is going to move forward from this. But I wanted to just start with this question to you. Obviously, you were in attendance in the at first rainy and then sunny, kind of weather all over the place game for Alabama and Michigan. But, I saw a post that said this game was kind of a microcosm of Alabama's season as a whole. And before we dive into what went wrong in this game specifically and how that was a microcosm, I was just curious if you maybe agree with that sentiment after watching this 2024 season, first year under DeBoer.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in terms of just underperforming. I mean, like Alabama had a team that, if you look at the talent on this team, you just wonder, it leaves you scratching your head. There's plays. You saw the 41-yard run by Jalen Milroe. You saw, there's brief explosion. You had some, nice plays by Jeremy Bernard, the passing game a little bit, but it's only been moments for this team and they can't put it together, and you finally get a really great performance from the defense. Not finally, but you do get a really great performance from the defense, and then the offense just puts up an absolute stinker. I mean, in every way. So yeah, it's the same frustrations. I think this team has lived and died by Jalen Milroe, and I think he was extremely poor today. And so obviously they're going to look extremely poor. And it's just they're so reliant on one player, and that's just what happens. But yeah, it's a frustrating game from an Alabama perspective. There's not really much ways you can sugarcoat it in that regard. I think that the defense, you really can't fault them for much, but when you're backed up against a wall like that, you're going to allow some points. I mean, all of Michigan's points came from when they got the ball in Alabama territory, and 3 of those times were in the red zone. So it's like, what do you do about that? So yeah, it's a frustrating game for Alabama, but I mean, I guess they move forward, and the good thing is tomorrow's a new year, or when this comes out, I guess it will be today. It's a new year. You can kind of flush this. You can listen to it, lick your wounds a little bit, but then you can flush this, and from an Alabama perspective, you can just kind of turn the next season, turn to the offseason.
Well, and I would be remiss as the basketball beat reporter on this site to say Alabama basketball conference play does start on January 4th. So you can turn to something
basketball season right now.
You can turn to something immediate too. But yeah, a microcosm for, one side of the ball keeping the team in it and the other putting them in a position to win the game at the end. And they just couldn't snatch victory away from the jaws of defeat. I mean, it was 3 out of the 4 losses, of course, in games where they were 14-point or more favorites. And some pretty inexcusable stuff. And I think, diving into it, you mentioned the turnovers. It was an atrocious first quarter. I know you just finished officially covering your 9th season of Alabama football. I feel like I can even say you probably have not watched a quarter worse than that. Maybe I'm wrong, but 3 turnovers in that span's pretty abysmal.
I'd have to go back and look at that Clemson game and how that all played out in the final, because that was pretty rough as well. But
yeah. It was a poor quarter, 3 turnovers, -2 total yards, by the way. And of course, it is the main talking point of this game. A lot of them were due to Jalen Milroe. He lost 2 fumbles. He was sacked. He had the interception on one of the turnovers. Finished the game 16 of 32 for 192 yards and a touchdown pass. 16 carries for 7 yards. He was sacked 5 times. And I mentioned one of them was the fumble. And this was the big talking point after, of course, Tony. Kalen DeBoer saying after the game, he did not think about making a switch at quarterback as much as it looked like that would happen in the first quarter. And I'm curious your thoughts there. That is the place to go. What did you make of that decision to stick it out with Milroe, and obviously didn't pay off in the end for Alabama?
I see the sentimentality behind it. I see why Kalen DeBoer did it. I think it was the wrong decision. I think Alabama probably wins the game, or at least has a better shot at winning the game with either of the 2 quarterbacks. Now, granted, we haven't seen them that much, so I'm going off of, anything would be better than what Jalen Milroe did. But, I mean, it's scary. If Alabama didn't have a better chance of winning with their backups, that's a scary thought for next season, because Jalen Milroe was really bad, in this game, and it was really surprising. Alabama managed 2 yards in their first 6 possessions, and at one point, you just start thinking you got to give Ty Simpson a chance. It just didn't seem fair to the offense. It didn't seem fair to Ty Simpson. I mean, look, it was basically the offense was moving, and it was kind of reminiscent of the last time Alabama went to the stadium and played USF, and Jalen Milroe was playing the role of Tyler Buckner today, and you didn't leave Tyler Buckner in the game. I think Ty Simpson should have had a chance, especially when Jalen had 3 turnovers in the span of 4 plays. That's the time where you kind of make a move. And I think what happened was, Kalen DeBoer, obviously you're going to play your starter. You send the right message by playing your starter in this one. But then I don't think he wanted to send Jalen off in a bad way. And then the game kept on getting closer and closer, or not necessarily closer and closer, but the game remained close. So there wasn't that, natural time to take Jalen off, because they never really got down too far. But it's like almost like your ceiling was too low with him at quarterback today to win the game. I thought it was a big mistake. I think at that point, if this was I think you'd be a lot more harder on Kalen if this was a playoff game, if this game really did mean something. But I think that probably cost Alabama a chance to win. I didn't think that there was a way they were going to move the ball. Jalen Milroe was missing open receivers. He was holding the ball. He had 5 sacks. And I get it. This defensive line for, this Michigan defense is strong up front, but it's missing its 3 best defensive linemen who all opted out. They should have been able to do more. They missed it. They missed a first round cornerbacks who's not available as well. So they should have been able to move the ball more. This is a 7-5 Michigan team. This is not the national championship Michigan team from last year. It's not even really the 7-5 team, or 8-5 now, but it's not even that, and this was maybe Alabama's worst loss of the season when you think about just everything that happened and the competition it was going against. It's pretty embarrassing. And I think it was a really poor, it's unfortunate for Jalen Milroe, but it was just a very poor performance from him. I think, I think they got too sentimental with it and they kept him in. I think Ty Simpson probably wins him this game.
Yeah, and I want to ask about that. You mentioned the disconnect, and we've seen the ups and the downs from Jalen Milroe when it comes to hitting receivers, and it felt like everything sort of boiled over. I mean, on the broadcast, there were a couple of shots of Jeremy Bernard who had 4 catches for 80 yards, and yet I saw on our board people posting that they didn't even see him on the field. It felt like he wasn't as much of a presence, but on the broadcast, I mean, there were visible shots of him and Ryan Williams looking extremely frustrated. And it just seemed like everything that we've seen that was inconsistent with Milroe just kind of reared its ugly head once again. And it's just sort of you keep going in this circle. And then, at the end of the game, that struck me too. Alabama has that good drive that started by the Ryan Williams 38-yard punt return. They get down to the 15 and then throw the ball 4 times. And I know you wrote about kind of the lack of run game, and DeBoer talked about it, but with Jalen Milroe playing as kind of lackluster as he was, and that disconnect that you talk about seeming there, were you surprised by some of the play calling, and how do you think maybe that influenced and created some of those moments that you sort of seemed like some of the receivers kind of boiled over?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the definition of insanity, right? I mean, I think, Jalen Milroe it wasn't getting done, and they, the flip side is when the passing game was so bad that maybe the running, they were able to stop the running game. And then once again, it's the classic story of Alabama playing behind, and it's almost like, do you have the time to commit to the running game? But I think you did, because I think that the defense was getting stops. I think you could have gotten the running game started. So I mean, 12 carries total for Alabama running backs. That's not taking Jalen out of the equation. Jan Miller had 10 rushes for 27 yards. I mean, that's not great. It's 2.7 yards a carry, but he didn't really have a chance to get into any kind of a rhythm. Even Jalen, I mean, look, I think Jalen, if you take out the sacks, I want to say he had like 11 carries for 60 yards, like the real, those are real carries for real yards, not sacks. 41 of those was on one scramble. So really, if he wasn't moving the ball that well, it's not like he was running the ball really well and they were just shying away from the running backs. I would have tried to do something different. It was very boring to me playing, game call. They were able to spark a few things. I thought the Rico Scott end around, I mean, that's something that you could tell that they've been working on because it was very successful and it did spark a touchdown drive. But especially for a bowl game, it seemed like a very just lost, boring, hard to watch offense. That's just kind of surprising. I mean, I don't really know what did Alabama learn from this game, or what did it get from this game? I mean, it's another thing too. It's like, do you play at least if you put Ty Simpson in and he's terrible, or you put Austin Mack in and he's terrible, at least right? At least he gets that experience. I mean, I would think that Jalen Milroe is going to leave. He hasn't announced that he's going to leave, but he entered the game as the number 3 quarterback on Mel Kiper's big board. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's another question too. I mean, do you think that Jalen Milroe should leave for the NFL? Because I have to say, I think he's playing his worst football right now. I think he's playing worse football, than he did even midway through last season. I think you've got a really weak quarterback class, but I'm not necessarily sure that he's not. For a while there, I thought he couldn't really tank his draft status too much. I think he's going to be helped by by the combine. He's going to run a really good combine. He can throw the heck out of the ball. He's got all the power, attributes that you want. But I don't know. I don't know, whether it's even best for him to go to the NFL right now because he's really regressed. And so yeah, it was surprising to see them kind of keep the ball in his hands as much as they did with as poor as he was playing.
Yeah, there was I think a very good question posed by one of our board users, which was, is Jalen Milroe a better player when the game kicked off against Michigan this year versus when it got kicked off last year? And I feel like
for sure no.
Yeah.
For sure no. I don't think so at all. I mean, he had just come off. He didn't have a great game against Michigan that year, but I mean, he had just come off of a decent performance against Georgia. He was, moving the ball. I think he was passing it better than he is now. I mean, like he's just not moving the ball through the air. He's taking 5 sacks against a backup defensive line. I think for sure he was better last year.
Yeah, so that's very telling. And you make a really good point about kind of the uninspiring sort of game that you watched. It was sort of the opposite of what we heard all week, where all these veterans were opting in. And I think you did see that on the defensive side. We'll talk about Jihad Campbell in a second. But yeah, on the offensive side, it was almost like these guys opted in, and you would have almost rather have seen these newcomers play who would have had a chip on their shoulder and been excited by their opportunity. Instead, it just looked, flat all around. I think that's an excellent point that you make there. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean that's worth pointing out too. I mean, look. Caden Proctor, a guy that we had reported wasn't going to play, played the whole game. So there was a change of plans there because we were told that he wasn't going to play. Should he have played? I mean, like he didn't look good. I mean, like what was it? Whether it's his heart, was his heart there? Was he healthy enough? I can't tell you those. I know he's dealing with an injury that he's dealt with all season. I know he's going to have surgery on it after the year, but. I mean, should he have played? I mean, because I don't think he should have. And then there's probably other players. I mean, would Wilkin Formby kind of came in at times, so it's not even like Caden Proctor didn't finish out the game. They weren't drastically better with Wilkin, so I don't know if that really fits your argument in that case. But yeah, I mean, you definitely go back to the quarterback position there. It just would have been nice to see. You did see people like Rico Scott play, I guess, if you're looking at that. He made some plays as a receiver that hadn't done much all season. He looked like a nifty guy. Like there's a reason why Alabama recruited him. So yeah, it would have been nice to see some of the younger guys. I mean, I would have really liked them to commit to the running game and maybe seeing Richard Young. We talked all this time, we talked for a month about how this was going to be Richard Young's game. He gets 2 carries for 6 yards. I mean,
Yeah, that's a good point. And on a side note to all that too, I was disappointed in I believe it was just one Jalen Mbakwe target. I was really hoping they had something drawn up for that perhaps, but instead it was an overthrow by Jalen Milroe out of bounds. So just a a flat, really, really disappointing day that sort of reflects some regression by certain players and just a a season where the offense just could not get the kind of consistency it was looking for. I do want to ask about the defensive side of the ball, Tony, because that is if there's any good to take out of this game, it is on that. And Michigan only had 190 yards of offense. They did get 115 of those yards on the ground. Only one touchdown. They were 5 of 16 on third downs. Alabama generated a takeaway, of course, with Zabian Brown, another interception in the secondary. Was there anything more this defense could have done in your eyes to give Alabama a better chance in this game, or is everything kind of solely down to the offense here?
I mean, I thought I did. I mean, I think like we said, they started Michigan's 4 scoring drives. They got the ball, or I think 4 of them. I'm trying to think. They got the ball in Alabama territory, and 3 of them were in the red zone. So, I mean, yeah, that's always tough to deal with. I think this defense has always kind of struggled at getting home to the quarterback. I think somebody said it on Twitter. I forget who it was. So sorry if I'm not giving the right attribution, but that LT Overton leads the nation in almost sacks or whatever. Yeah, I think that's probably true. I mean, it's like Alabama's always so close to getting a sack and then they don't. That being said, what are the third down numbers? They're not terrible.
5 of 16 Michigan was.
Yeah, you'll take 5 of 16, especially with this defense. So you had one turnover. I know Kane Womack's probably wants more than one turnover, but I thought, they did everything you could ask for them to do. I thought that they were pretty good. I mean, they held Michigan under 200 yards. Alabama, as bad as they looked on offense, outgained Michigan 260 to 190. So, right. I mean, gosh, those are dreadful numbers. I can't, this game, I mean, don't rewatch this game if you're listening to it. If you're thinking about, let me go. This is one of those you just flush and just forget it happened. There's nothing good you can get, and unless Alabama is paying you as an assistant coach to rewatch this game, do not. Just probably try to erase it from your memory. Maybe you had a fun New Year's Eve night and you already forgot about it, and that's great. Maybe even just maybe just stop listening to us right now. So you're trying to erase this game from your memory.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I will ask you this because for, a lack of kind of future talent showcasing on the offensive end, we did see some defensively. And I'm curious if, does this game make you excited about the future of this defense? I saw some good contributions from some freshmen, Zabian Brown, obviously James Smith, another big one. Zay Mincy started. How, does this help make you excited, maybe this defense being pretty elite next year?
Yeah, I thought James Smith was fun to watch. I mean, he's a menace down there, and if he can kind of keep it all reined in, I think he's one of those guys that he has to be. I think he has that pass rushing ability. I think he's probably got to be on a consistent. I think his thing is just getting that to a consistent basis and staying in this assignment. But you can see the raw ability there. He has the potential to be like a really fun player to watch. I think maybe like Christian Barmore was like that, where he was like, you knew once he put it all together that he was going to be good. It just kind of took a while. I think that could be. I'm not trying to. I don't know defensive line necessarily well enough to give you like a comparison there, but I think in terms of a raw to someone that can be great even at the next level, great. I think James Smith is in that like Christian Barmore range where I'm excited to see what he can do. I thought, like you said, Zay Mincy got his first start. I thought that I think he had seven tackles and a pass deflection. That's solid. I mean, like the thing is too, I mean, you can gush over some of these stats. Zabian Brown had his 3rd interception. He's tied with Bray Hubbard, who they're both going to be starters next year, most likely. Deshaun Jones played the Husky position. That might be where he plays next year. So, it's promising to kind of see this could be next year's defense. At the same time, I kind of warn anyone from being too excited over it because this is a really bad Michigan offense that was without its, I think, like top 2 running backs, and it had opt-outs. It had, its top tight end out. So, I mean, like this wasn't your typical, it wasn't necessarily a good Michigan offense to begin with. and it definitely wasn't a good Michigan offense today. So, but yeah, no, if you're just going based on the performance and you're disregarding the talent level and all that, like it was an excellent performance. I just think that don't get too carried away, I guess, with it, because they really had no business losing to this Michigan team. I think it just once again speaks to how bad the offensive performance was, that you couldn't even get 20 points. Yeah, that's really all you needed to win this game. With everything that happened, all you needed was 20 points. You couldn't get 20 points.
We'll call it a small silver lining, a sliver of a silver lining, if you want to call it that. And yeah, obviously throw into Davis Warren, of course, getting injured on a James Smith sack that was then negated in a chaotic sort of situation with the sideline warning. So yeah, I think it is good that they played well against a bad offense. I guess that is what
Sure.
you would expect to see. And now we kind of look to some of the immediate future of some of these guys, Tony. I know you talked to a few players after the draft, Tyler Booker and Jalen Milroe included, and you've got this January 15th NFL draft deadline coming up. What did a couple of those guys maybe say about their status? And I know you talked about Milroe, but I don't know if this game changes anything in your eyes in terms of who might leave and who could possibly come back as they look toward the NFL draft.
I still expect we kind of ran through this on the site a couple of days ago. I still expect the same people, and this game didn't really change anything. Like, we talked to Tyler Booker, he didn't comment, but he's not coming back. I mean, he has a chance to maybe be a first round pick, but definitely a day 2 selection. So I think it's safe to say he's gone. I'd be very shocked from what I've heard if Jalen Milroe returns. Like, should he return? I mean, I don't know. I think there's an argument to be made that maybe Jalen should return and transfer, and then maybe try to go the Jalen Hurts route. I definitely don't see that happening. But who knows? I mean, I think he probably, I would say 99% sure he goes pro as well. There's some guys that I think maybe I'm less sure on. Damani Jackson. I think he's a guy that I don't necessarily know if he's going to be a high pick, but he's got a lot of talent. He could kind of maybe bet on himself. I think he might be somebody that tests well at the combine. And then, it's one of those things. He's had such a solid year. It's like, do you want to risk it? Do you think next year will be better or worse? I think maybe you invest in yourself, or you kind of take a chance maybe on yourself there. He might be somebody that has a decision. I thought it was interesting that Tim Keenan after the game said that he wasn't sure. I think most people would think he's a slam dunk come back guy. I don't know if he's just, feeling confident and wants to test the waters, but I would kind of bet whenever he, when he hears his draft grade, I think he'd probably want to come back. LT Overton, same kind of thing. I think LT Overton's one of those guys that could be a swing guy. I also kind of wonder too, and this is maybe just the cynic in me, are some of these guys maybe being coy because NIL deals aren't done yet? You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, maybe you can convince me to come back. Maybe, maybe I'll go pro if I don't get the right money. So I don't know if that's the case. I haven't been told that's the case. I'm just, using common sense here. If I was a player, maybe I wouldn't want to just say, hey, I'm back until the NIL money starts piling up.
No, that's absolutely a thing to consider in this day and age. And, I'm curious to see what some of those decisions wind up being. I mean, I talked about him as someone who showed his frustration today. Jeremy Bernard's another one, Jamarian Latham, two guys we talked about on this show previously. And then another one I'll just throw in there, as a pretty 99% sure gone guy. But, what a way to go out, kind of, disappointing, couldn't finish the game. But Jihad Campbell, I mean, you want to talk about a guy who was the engine of this defense and has been all season. 11 tackles, gets hurt. Still a good performance, but probably the last we saw of him in a Tide uniform as well.
Oh, for sure. He is, to be honest with you, I mentioned Tyler Booker as a potential first-round pick. I don't know if somebody's just going to be blown away by Jalen Milroe. I've always kind of said he could maybe be a late first-rounder just because he's a quarterback and just because it's such a weak quarterback class. That's getting harder to believe right now. But I think I'm not entirely sure Alabama will have a first-rounder, but if you told me there was one first-rounder Based on Milroe's performance, I would probably go with Jihad. I think he's a guy that can do a lot. He can play inside, but we've also seen him play outside. I think NFL teams are going to absolutely love that. He seems like he's a good kid. He's not he wasn't a team captain, but he seems like if Alabama had an extra team captain spot, it feels like it would go to him. So I think he's going to give NFL teams a ton to be excited for. I think I remember when he came out of high school, people were calling him like the next Micah Parsons or whatever. Like, I'm not gonna say he's that, but he's got he has a chance to be really, really good in the league. So I think he's a late first, early second guy, and I don't want to see, I don't want to Alabama to be mad at me, but it'd be a mistake if he didn't leave for the NFL draft. I mean, he needs to cash in.
Yeah, I've been gushing over Jihad Campbell all year. I think a team is going to be really, really happy wherever he ends up in the pros. And yeah, feel for him to go out with an injury, but still managed 11 tackles before he did it. 10 of them, I think, were in the first half. So shout out to Jihad. And we reflected on the game. We kind of talked about what was going on or what went wrong to cause Alabama to lose this, Tony. And now we're going to do what you told Tide fans to do on this new year, where hopefully you're enjoying your New Year's Day as much as you can. We're going to flush the tape. We're going to move on. We're going to reflect a little bit just kind of on, this first year of the Kalen DeBoer era. And obviously it is a disappointing one. You lose that 10 game wins streak that Nick Saban, of course, started. You don't make the college football playoff when it looked like, ahead of that LSU game, there was maybe a chance you could go to Atlanta and compete for a SEC title and potentially a bye. And, now you're kind of limping into this offseason. And I'm curious, when you reflect kind of immediately on this year, who do you maybe not necessarily assign blame to, but, where does some of the fault lie, if you will? Obviously, it wasn't going to ever be perfect in a coach's first year, but when you just look at things holistically, what in your eyes kind of went wrong that didn't allow Alabama to meet some of those goals that they set for themselves?
Yeah, I think Alabama is a team that's flawed in two areas that you look at as maybe the most important area, or really multiple areas where you look at the most important areas of a football team. I think it's got a lot of flaws at the quarterback position with Jalen Milroe. He is a excellent college football player. He is not always an excellent quarterback. And he does a lot of things that, can win you a game. But I think on a consistent basis, you need someone that can get the ball and distribute a little bit better than he did this season. That I'm not trying to take away the stuff he's done, because he's been a special player for Alabama, but I think they needed him to elevate his game to a level that he didn't get to. And I think, when we talked about it at the beginning of the year, it could be a really special season for Alabama if Jalen Milroe rose to his absolute potential, but he just didn't. In fact, I think, as we said earlier, I think you could say that he regressed. So that was, kind of tough to see. I think, we talked about this a little bit earlier too, but Alabama didn't have that elite edge rusher that it's had in recent years. Quay Russell looked good at times, and LT Overton provided some pressure at times, but neither of those guys got home to the quarterback enough to really affect defenses. I think that when you saw Alabama struggle on third downs, not necessarily against Michigan, but in general this season, that was a big problem. A lot of that was because they couldn't get home. They couldn't get those sacks to get off the field. They couldn't put defenses in absolutely unmanageable, unreasonable down and distances to pick up first downs, and so that kind of hurt. And then I think the protection too. I mean, now some of that's on Jalen for holding the ball too long, but I think you look at the right tackle position was always a mess this year with Elijah Pritchett or Wilkin Formby. They couldn't get consistency there. That's something that they're going to have to improve. So those three areas, I mean, what are the three most important positions? I guess left tackle, you had that with Caden Proctor, but you got your edge rushing, problem with tackle, problem with quarterback. If you have that, you're going to have some problems. And then you had a young secondary. I think the secondary actually kind of bounced back, and I thought it performed really well. But you have all those on top of having a young secondary. I think that's just too much.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, you talked about reflecting on the first season and talking about it could be special if we get what we could get out of Jalen Milroe. And of course, we talked ad nauseum in the offseason about what kind of expectations were for DeBoer, how we were feeling about DeBoer. So I'll ask you the kind of same question. I mean, a year in, where does your maybe confidence level lie in terms of him being a leader for this team and kind of trying to continue the legacy of this program? Obviously didn't meet the goals that people wanted him to meet, but he talked about it in his post game. It was a hard off season. It wasn't a full off season. And, he had to do a lot of work to keep the roster together. There was ups and downs all year long, but ultimately, it didn't reach his goals. And as you kind of look to the future, where does maybe your confidence level lie with him, kind of building off of this?
I think if you're trying to be confident from an Alabama perspective, you got to be more confident in the system than the stars, because I don't really know if there's that star player. I mean, you're not going to have a star quarterback come back. But at the same time, I think you look at it and you think it's going to be more of DeBoer's team. I think part of this problem was, not to say that DeBoer can't have a running quarterback and can't, obviously he's proved smart enough to make it work with Jalen to a certain extent, but this is not the ideal, setup that you would have with this offense. So I think, when you look at it, whoever they have, whether it's Austin Mack or Ty Simpson, I don't think it's going to be Keelan Russell, just because it's so hard to be a true freshman. Especially, I think defenses are, you're having more veterans, so I think it's just going to be really tough to be a true freshman. But, any one of those three, I think is going to be a better distributor. And I'd like to see if you want to be optimistic, I think, the thing you might see next year on offense is it might look more like a DeBoer offense. They might be able to do more stuff, theoretically, that they weren't able to do. That being said, I mean, you can speak optimistically about Ty Simpson or Austin Mack. We really haven't seen much from them. So I guess you're just theoretically hoping that they will be able to develop, and they are more in the mold of what Kalen DeBoer likes, but there is still some worry there, and I think, also on the optimistic side, you look at the defense we mentioned, the secondary is going to be a lot more experienced. They still probably need to find that edge rusher. I'm not sure that they've got it. They added Kelby Collins, but I don't know if he's necessarily a plug-in play guy that's going to be really good. We'll see who comes back. If LT Overton comes back, does he take his game to that next level? Do you have guys like James Smith that come through and get more consistent? So maybe that front end. I think on defense too, the other thing that I think I'd be confident in is you went from maybe losing all three of your linebackers to possibly having, three veteran guys. You brought in the transfer, and I always mix up his last name, from Colorado. Hill Green. I always want to call him Green Hill, and I mess it up. So yeah, Hill Green, Nakai Hill Green from Colorado. But it looks like you're going to get Justin Jefferson back. So that'll be big, give you two experienced guys. And I wouldn't put it past, we didn't talk about him in the draft departures segment of this pod, but Deontay Lawson had a very unfortunate injury that could affect his draft stock. And it could make a lot of sense for him to come back, because I think he's got a ton of potential. I think he has a potential to be, I don't know if I've always kind of liked, I can't think of it. Oh my gosh, my brain is fried.
In case you're wondering,
Tony, linebacker. Sorry, Jihad Campbell. Thank you. I've always kind of liked Jihad Campbell's game better, but I think Deontay Lawson has a chance to be, to be close to that level, and so maybe a day 2 pick next year, late day 1, kind of close to that level if he comes back. That being said, he does have a lot of good stuff on tape already, and he might want to just test his luck despite the injury, but you could get him back, and that could really shore up the middle of the defense as well. So I'm kind of rambling, but there's plenty to be excited about. I think there's not that star player other than Ryan Williams. I think there's been more star-centric Alabama teams than this one, but I think it might fit more in terms of scheme.
Yeah, I definitely think that, and I think as much as Kalen DeBoer doesn't give you maybe as many fiery moments as Nick Saban did, or things like that, to me, the theme we continued to hear from him all year was kind of this culture setting. And I think, he does have a pretty strong idea of what he wants from a team. And I think that is part of the reason why he's been successful at other places. And I do think, as more of the personnel on the team that he wants, and like you said, it'll fit with the scheme, I think it'll also kind of, further establish the culture that he wants to set in his version of the Alabama program. And I think, it's proved to be a winning one. So I think I look ahead to that, and clearly he's already got some people buying in, and this is where I'll segue. Tony, you touched on some of the needs still, but closing the chapter on this season, you look ahead. This team's already brought in a few transfer portal additions. They have a top 5 class in 2025. DeBoer's kind of shown some of his prowess on the recruiting trail, but as you look ahead now, maybe what's the biggest priority number one now that we're officially in off-season mode with the bowl game wrapped up? What would you say in your eyes is the number one priority here? And maybe give your final thoughts as well on a season, a roller coaster of a season for the Crimson.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the things Alabama needs, like the edge rusher, but I think if the Michigan, if the ReliaQuest Bowl taught you one thing, they need to find a quarterback that can distribute the ball. So whether it's seeing what you have with Ty Simpson or Austin Mack this spring, or I mean, shoot, if it ends up that they don't work, maybe go in and getting a quarterback if you need one. I don't think you need one. I'm pretty confident with the quarterbacks Alabama has, but I think just figuring that out first and foremost. I think once you get that down, I like the receivers. We didn't mention Isaiah Horton coming in as well on offense, and so I like the receivers Alabama has. I think it's going to have one of the once again, other than Ryan Williams, there's not that 1,000-yard guy that's gotten 1,000 yards or anything, but I think you've got 3 guys in Horton, Williams, and Bernard that are all capable of 1,000 yards. So I think you're in really good shape there. I think Jam Miller's a nice back. So the offensive line, you got to show up that right tackle spot. Whether it's Will Conformi that wins the job, whether it's Elijah Pritchett that wins it, you got to figure it out. And so I would say that in the quarterback position, but I think like we said before, there's plenty of positivity to be had. I think it's going to be a really interesting spring. Not to advertise for the site, but it's definitely there's a lot to look forward to this spring, because you're going to have the quarterback battle, of course, but there's a lot of I kind of want to see. I think you're going to learn a lot more about Kalen DeBoer and what this program is really all about when he gets to put more of his stamp into it. So we'll see, and I'm sure he's already back to work. I'm sure this is not going to sit with him, and he's going to stir over this. Is back-to-back seasons now that his season's been ended by Michigan, and I'm sure that doesn't sit well with him.
Yeah, absolutely not. I'm also really excited to see the full off season. And he's got his established staff. I remember he talked a lot about that took a while into the spring, and probably prevented him from doing some things that he wanted to do. So he's going to have more time for that. And yeah, we will freely promote the site. Go subscribe to Tide Illustrated. We have plenty of good game coverage. Tony did great work down in Tampa, covering this game as crazy and chaotic as it was, and ultimately disappointing for Alabama. Alabama fans, hopefully this didn't ruin your New Year's celebration, and you can ring in the new year by hopefully looking ahead. And another shameless plug, we've got Alabama basketball SEC play starting up, and we'll have plenty of podcasts, plenty of content on the site for that as well. So go subscribe over there. Plenty coming still, even with football in the books now in 2024. We've got plenty coming in 2025 for off-season content and basketball. So go drop us a follow on Spotify if you're listening there. Throw a comment in the YouTube. Like Tony said at the beginning, feel free to use it as your therapy session, your rant session if need be. Subscribe on Tide Illustrated, subscribe on the YouTube, and we will see you next time.